Reverse the climate change. This is the slogan of your company, of Climeworks. What does that mean for you?
Well, science tells us that in order to achieve climate targets, so to meet the Paris Agreement, by mid of the century, we need to remove gigatons, so billions of tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And that's what we are working on at Climeworks. So we are building machines that capture CO2 from the air, and we combine that with safe underground storage. So we permanently remove CO2 from the atmosphere.
That's why we came together, at least, and even before the Paris Agreement in 2015, I guess. We already worked together since 2013. Yeah. A few years after you grounded, you based your company as a spin-off from the ETH Zurich. And as far as I remember, even we were the first one at Audi who were ordering the first demonstrator, isn't it so?
That's true, yeah. So we are still very proud of it, Audi being our first customer for a demonstration plant. So back in the days, we started in the laboratory, then we slowly scaled it up, and the first scaled up demonstration plant that we ever delivered, that was to Audi. And the journey started there.
We showed that to the board, and now I think it's still working. The first demonstrator is still working here around the corner at the University of Rapperswil, I guess, and still in good shape, I know. But afterwards, we were proud because we were the first one who ordered the 50 tons base module that you invented.
Oh, that's right. That was kind of the next step on the scale-up roadmap. So we scaled up our demonstrator into one module, which can then be multiplied for building larger plants. And they're also proud to have Audi as the first customer and for the first plant.
Right, yeah, and at least it ends up, and that's where we are very proud of, it ends up in now two big scale demonstrator or full scale sites that we have here around the corner in Zurich, Hinwil. And now we are able to even capture 1,000 tons of CO2 out of the ambient air. And that's why we are also very proud of that.
Well, that's right. That's what we're doing here in the vicinity of Zurich. So there we're capturing CO2 from the air to deliver it to customers, to a greenhouse and to the beverage industry. Then one step further, so we've changed our business more, or developed a new business model of a service. So we learned, starting as an engineers, we build a lot of plants, but many people don't want to buy plants and operate them, but they have a different need. So many companies and also even private people have the need or want to do something to reduce the amount of CO2 in the air, and that's what we're offering in Iceland now. That's
the interesting thing, Iceland. I think we have to explain a little bit more what is going on in Iceland. Yeah. You are building a new and a bigger demonstrator there?
Yes, so we started in 2017. That's when we met the former president of Iceland, Olafur Grimsson, and he had the vision of turning Iceland into a, as he called it, global pumping station. So to remove CO2 from the air and to safely store it underground.
So a negative pumping station.
That's really negative to create so-called negative emissions. And interesting about Iceland is the geology there. So there are so-called basalt rocks underground, and the people in Iceland, actually Reykjavik Energy, who's a main utility company in Iceland, they have developed over the past 10 years a method of safely storing CO2 in these basalt rocks. And the interesting thing about this is they inject the CO2 underground, and within 2 years the CO2 converts into stone. And the process is called Carbfix, and there's also in the meantime a company called Carbfix. There's our partner companies, and together with them we are now scaling up our operations. So Climeworks is right now building a larger plant, a direct air capture plant in Iceland, taking about 4,000 tons of CO2 from the air every year, and we're handing that over to our Carbfix partners who are injecting it down into ground.
They pump it down to the basalt. Because this is so interesting for us, at least, because from my point of view, we are just closing the whole big circle right now. Yeah. This is a circle project, a circular economy project, at least. We bring down the whole carbon which we once brought up out of the air back into the air, and there hopefully store it forever, at least, isn't it?
Well, that's important, and there is a lot of storage space. So available storage space, that is not the limiting factor. Like the sites have to be developed, and most importantly in Iceland, it is so like there are no questions about safety or safe and permanence of the storage, because what you end up is CO2 in the form of rocks 1 kilometer underground.
We hope that is solid. It's a solid thing. But I think looking a little bit in the future, of course, there is something to do with which I think we should do together, of course, because to bring down the CO2 again inside of the rocks and so that is it's an ambitious aim, and we are all working in this direction. But of course, we have to certify this as well, because there's at the moment we don't have the standard or a gold standard or some platinum and platinum standard also for that. Do you work on that in the next few years, or?
That's a work in progress. That's like the whole circle or the whole process we are developing is something new. So there are no final existing standards for that, and we are working to create them now. So we believe that within next year, we should have a certification. So we're working together with notified bodies to design basically on paper a process and to make it
would be then developed, so you can at least handle all this stuff. The topic right now, the direct air capturing technology, becomes more and more in the mind of the people, and gets more and more a common technology. At least we have to talk even about serial production. At the moment, you are just working here and you're building the containers and the modules in Zurich, and it's just, well, from my point of view, it's just good for a few hundred of these containers. But what do you think is the next step in going really big? Because you need a few thousand of these modules in the next few years.
No, that's absolutely correct. So today we are capturing thousands of tons. In the future, we will capture millions of tons, and eventually we have to think of billions of tons capturing, which requires a substantial scale up. So what we're actually speaking of is not building up only a company, but rather building up an entire industry. And how to tackle this challenge? One important aspect of our strategy of Climeworks, how we designed our system, is a very modular approach. So our CO2 capture plans are fully modular, based on container modules, which can be scaled by mass production, basically. So it's actually very similar to the car industry. So the car industry has become very, very efficient in building individual pieces, modules, right, and millions of that. And we believe that also for what we are doing, this is a very smart approach. So rather than thinking of making individual plants and components bigger and bigger, rather thinking of how to multiply them in numbers. So that's the challenge we are ahead of, and that's the general principle based on how we design our systems, making them mass manufacturable.
It's very difficult for me to understand how it really works. How does the CO2 comes at least to your container, and how does it release it again? Could you explain that a little bit?
The basic principle is quite simple. In our containers, there is a filter material in a two-step process. First, we pull air through it, so we have fans that are pulling air through the filter. And the filter, you can imagine it as a sponge. It's like a porous material with a lot of pores, holes inside where the air can pass through, and at the surface, the CO2 is bound. So it just captures out the CO2 out of the airstream. We do that until this filter is filled with CO2. Then we close the container, we heat it up, and we can extract concentrated CO2 from it.
Is the material an absorber or is it an adsorber?
It's a so-called adsorption, because it's a solid material. Okay, so it's
real chemical binding of the CO2.
Yeah, so it is called so-called chemisorption. So there is a slight chemical reaction, if you like, but it's a passive one. So during the capturing phase of the CO2, the only active part of the plant is the ventilator that is pulling air through it, and that capturing of CO2 happens passively. And since it's if you want, it's a very soft binding only, and by heating the material to around 100 degrees, you lose the binding again, and that's how you can extract the CO2 again. Yeah.
Okay, you extract it, and then what happens with the CO2 afterwards?
Well, it
It's
depends.
just
It depends
again in the air.
on the application. So we have CO2 in concentrated form. We can liquefy it, or we can just compress it. What we do in Iceland is we compress the CO2, and then at about a pressure of around 20 bar, it is injected underground. So that's what's happening. In other applications, we liquefy the CO2 when we supply it to the beverage industry, as an example. So there are different.
Okay, if you use it for
Yes.
other things
Yes.
as a raw material
Yes.
and so on.
Exactly.
We have to talk about costs, at least. Do you think that that there's still some developing ongoing, that the costs will go down and will reach, well, at least the range of, let's say so, about 30, 40 euros per ton?
Well, obviously, reducing the cost is one of the major challenge of our industry and of Climeworks. So, from generation to generation, we increase the efficiency of our systems and correspondingly reduce costs. So, currently, we are at several $100 per ton, and the aim is to reduce that further. So, the magic number the whole industry has in mind is an order of around $100 per ton of CO2 capturing costs. So, that's where we are not yet today, but that's where we're.
But there's a roadmap, maybe.
There's a roadmap, and it's also not the next step. So we believe rather like we have a rather concrete path to the range to $200, $250 per ton, and then there's further optimization. But having in mind where we stand, I like to compare it to kind of back in the days when you had the first car, and if you compare the very first car prototype to a factory which is producing millions of cars, so there's a huge potential of optimizing, right? And so it's the same.
Absolutely, because we went together the whole roadmap from 2013 to now, and we started with 30,000 euros per ton, and now we are about, let's say, so 1,000 euros, 500 to 1,000 euros per ton.
If you look at other industries, if you look at the photovoltaic industry, how many, like they accomplished cost reduction by factors, like by large factors, and much more than we are even aiming at. So I believe by just mass producing, optimizing of processes, so there's still a lot in to work on. One of our development leaders once said between today and the $100 per ton, it's just humans in between. So there's no physical reason why it wouldn't work. And
okay, let's talk about the future. At least we are still having a cooperation with you. What do you think is the next step in our cooperation?
Well, I think we are thrilled by the general interest of the industry, and we are thrilled also to have Audi as a customer for our new service of removing CO2 from the air, and we are expanding that. So the challenge is that we are constantly expanding capacity, and we need pioneering customers such as Audi who help us like proving and showing that there is a market, so we can on the other hand trigger investments, and that's what we do on several layers. Like we are even selling CO2 to consumers or to private individuals. So you could also, as a person, you could go to our website and have a subscription that we turn CO2 into stone for you. So that's great. Please tell a lot of people. Like many people ask us, hey, what could I do? It's so great what you're doing, and I would like to contribute and do something for my own CO2 footprint, and that's why last year we started a prototype. And I think besides a commercial collaboration on removing CO2 on behalf of companies, on behalf of Audi, also like our vision is inspiring 1 billion people to remove CO2 from the air. And to do that, we need the help of others. So we need people spread the word. Audi is a very, very famous brand. And if I think, for my personally, as a dream, thinking of the planet, if your engagement in what we are doing could lead to many, many other people follow you and follow you as a brand, I think that could be a really good way forward, and we could reach something really meaningful here.
Absolutely. You already inspired me. That's why we're here.